into the PFF YouTube channel. I'm George Chahrouri. I'm joined by the big guy, Eric Eager, and it is time to unveil the PFF NFL Power Rankings before Week 1. We're almost there. I'll remind you, of course, we are brought to you by mybookie.ag. It's where you need to head if you haven't headed there already. We're only, a couple hours away from kickoff, so make sure you get over to mybookie.ag. Pairs nicely with the PFF Elite subscription. Get PFF Greenline and Premium Stats version 2. Let's go ahead and dive into this. We're going to start at the bottom. We're going to go teams 32.
As one does.
As one does. Teams 32 through 21. You see Cleveland and the Giants there at the bottom. I know there are some excited fans out there who have bet them to win the Super Bowl. Please rain on their parade.
Yeah, they are not the teams with the lowest Super Bowl odds, ironically. But, with Cleveland, every single year it's been sort of the same thing. And this year's a new year for a myriad of reasons. And, our model is sort of, continued to, bat those, things away. The Giants are an interesting one, right? They were poor a season ago. They were poor in the wrong places, right? Especially throwing the football. And now they acquired Saquon Barkley, all the fanfare that goes with that. We do not see that being necessarily a good thing for them moving forward, as we have them, anywhere from first, or, worst to the second worst in terms of wins this season, ranking it at 31 in our rankings.
All right, so let's be optimistic here for a second. A team in the bottom 10 or 12 that you think is most likely to jump, maybe come week 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think Houston, if the Deshaun Watson
Can't
stuff...
steal my pick, Eric.
I think the Deshaun Watson thing, if he ends up being what everybody thinks he is, they're immediately going to shoot out of this, bottom 10, bottom 12. I think another one that is our hometown Cincinnati Bengals, right? They have a strong defense. Atkins, Dunlap up front, but more importantly, Jackson in the back end, along with Kirkpatrick and Denard. I think they're a team who, if they get anything offensively with an improved offensive line, Andy Dalton, they could probably get into that, top 15 range if they're lucky.
Interesting. I also kind of like the Cardinals. I think people are sleeping on the Cardinals, but you nailed both of the ones that I was thinking of. Let's jump ahead now to teams 20 through 11. And we've got some real debatable teams here. The teams that people think should be in the top 10, certainly. Teams that people think should be down in the bottom, potentially competing for the #1 pick. So what jumps out at you when you look at this list?
I think it's Seattle, right? And our numbers actually like Seattle more than this 11. But, we obviously know with Earl, Thomas holding out and some of the issues they've had with injuries and defections from their defense. But Russell Wilson is, one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, and we think that carries a team, farther than other people do. And so while I think a lot of people will put them in the bottom 10, I think we'll have them here in the middle 10. Yeah,
I think it's interesting also to see Dallas so high up. They obviously struggled this season ago. And the reason that I think they're back up there isn't so much that Ezekiel Elliott is back. Let's remember that they ran the ball just as effectively without him in there. Yes. But the potential for them to have maybe an offensive line that, if they can get healthy, can't be worse than they were a season ago with some of the injuries that they suffered to Tyron Smith on the left side.
And they've drafted good players recently, right? So in the secondary, they have cornerbacks that I think are pretty good, and up front, they have DeMarcus Lawrence who can rush the passer, and they have linebackers who can cover. So I think defensively they're a bit underrated, and I think Dak is not going to be as bad as he was a season ago, and probably not as good as he was as a rookie. So, in the middle 10, I think is solid for them.
Yeah, it's interesting. Dak's number of open throws dropped by nearly 7% last season. Yep. So if that just goes back to the mean, and that's huge for him because we've seen that his accuracy on tight window throws, no bueno going back to his college career. All right, before we jump into the top 10, let me remind you, of course, mybookie.ag is where you've got to go before the season starts to get all of those bets down. They've got every bet that you could possibly want, all the way to over-unders on fantasy player totals for each week. We both use it. Couldn't recommend it highly enough. They make it easy to cash out. They've got great customer service. And the thing that I like the most is they've got in-game live betting so that no matter what, you can always make sure you've got the best bet down you can possibly have. Promo code PFF gets you a $1 match on your first deposit. So head to mybookie.ag, use promo code PFF. You play, you win, you get paid. It's that simple. All right, let's roll into the top 10, starting off with a very controversial one, which is Green Bay at 10.
Yeah, our PFF Elo system doesn't like them at 10, but of course we know that Aaron Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks possibly in the history of the league, right? And so we're going to move them up a little bit just on the basis of that, but know that, if there's injuries or ineffective play by Rodgers, they're a team that probably is more closer to 20 than they are 10.
There's no doubt. We saw what the Brett Hundley whatever you want to call it, disaster could do to that team. What's interesting about Green Bay, I don't want to take too long on them, but they have 2 rookie corners, and I think everyone is just assuming that they're going to jump in and be great. They also signed Tramon Williams. The ceiling is high there. We know what coverage can do, but it's also not something that you should ever be too sure of. So I think pumping the brakes a little bit on them. I think 10 makes sense. Let's jump up to maybe some teams that are in the 6-7 range that maybe come week 10 or so have cemented themselves in the top 3. Who do you think it'll be?
Yeah, I think it's the Rams, right? I think a lot of people like the Rams, right, as a team to sort of elevate themselves. They've done a lot to their roster this offseason, both re-signing established players, but also, acquiring talent. The thing with the Rams, it's always going to be the issue is Jared Goff going to be that quarterback that goes from ancillary piece that can be elevated by a coach and a good scheme to an elite level quarterback? I think if it's the latter, they're in the discussion for the top 4 or 5 teams in the league rather than being kind of on the outside looking in here.
Thinking about 2 teams, I'm going to be the pessimist here that could drop down. We're in agreement that it's probably the Vikings and the Jags that we could see some regression with. They rode strong defenses, to an incredible seasons last year, and those are things that we know just aren't as stable. And their quarterback play is something that, well, you'd want to probably be a little bit better. I don't think Kirk Cousins is likely to have the amazing Case Keenum year from last year, which is well above what you'd expect from him. And Blake Bortles, I think there's still a lot to be learned. Let's jump into the top 5 now. We've got Pitt, New Orleans, Atlanta, New England, and Philly. Of these teams, what's most interesting to you?
I think it's Atlanta, right? So last season was a time when we had Atlanta almost the whole time, and they were always sort of rated highly by our systems, and eventually they took off and became 10-6, right? It was slow and painful to do so. In the playoffs, they won a game convincingly on the road in Los Angeles, and they almost won against the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles on the road. I think this season is when, offensive coordinator another year under his belt. I think some of the bad luck that Matt Ryan got a season ago will turn around, and I think defensively their grades will start to be reflected in their production. Here's
a question for you. Pittsburgh sits at 5. I personally think they have their offense is great, but I'm really worried about their defense. Do you think they finish the season in the top 5?
I think so. The reason I think so is because I think the AFC is so weak, and aside from New England, Pittsburgh's really got a really easy division to some degree, and as a conference as a whole, it's very hard to drop out of that when you sort of have to pick a couple teams from the AFC. We know New England's probably going to be there, but Pittsburgh seems to be the odds-on favorite. Of the top 13 teams in our rating, only 3 are from the AFC, so not a very difficult path there.
All right, we'll close it out on this. You have to pick one team to finish number 1 at the end of the year. It's currently Philadelphia. Who are you going with?
Atlanta. Let's go with Atlanta.
All right. I love Atlanta. I'm going to be different. I'm going to go with New England because...
Why not?
Right now, Nathan Peterman is starting for the Bills. Let's just remember that. So I think we'll see many changes as we go. Obviously, there will be a lot of movement from week to week, and we'll keep you abreast of all of that. Head to ProFootballFocus.com. Get yourself a PFF Elite subscription. You get PFF Green Line with all of our picks for the upcoming NFL season. You pair that with MyBookie.ag. It's a winning combination. Make it happen. We'll see you guys next time.